Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Trans History in Arizona. I want to give a huge shout out to Arizona Virtual Pride. So happy that we are celebrating 1 year of doing this, which is really kind of exciting. We've been doing all kinds of amazing things throughout the year, as I'm sure you've seen. Um, and oh my gosh, we're gonna have such a great time today. So, a little bit about myself. My name is Marshall Shore. I'm also known as the hip historian. So, I do a wide variety of things with Arizona history, really focusing on Arizona. Now, how did I get here? So, a little over 21 years ago, I was working in a library in Brooklyn and decided it was time for a change. And so, my partner and I loaded everything into a big U-Haul and drove cross country and landed here in Phoenix. Now, as soon as we got here, all we kept hearing about how people kept saying there was no history here. But every time I would go for an adventure, whether it was on foot, on my bike, in a car, I came face to face with so many amazing people, places, and stories. And oh my gosh. And so we're going to talk about some of those amazing stories and some of those incredible people today as well. Also, the Phoenix New Times has named me Best Historian several years in a row, as well as Phoenix Magazine named me the Best Bespectacled Phoenix Celebrity because I do indeed like my eyewear. So I am here today with the Arizona LGBT plus History Project. We started actually several years ago when the 307, which was on the north side of Roosevelt and about 2nd Avenue, when that was torn down. And so if you're ever in that area and you look on the sidewalk where the 307 used to be, there is a plaque set into the concrete talking about how that bar was a community space, not just 1970, but even earlier than that. And so please go check out that plaque. Now, the 307 was an iconic bar. I mean, actually, it opened up actually in the late 30s and then wound up relocating and then becoming the 307 Lounge. It's had various names, but it has hosted so many celebrities around town, such as you see Pussy LaHoot there with some Degrassi murals behind her. He was a local artist that was looking for a cheap way to drink. And they said, as long as you're painting, your drinks are free. So he drank a lot and painted a lot. And then there we always have the Miss Ebony, as well as many other performers who are still on stage today have performed here as well. So the Arizona LGBT History Project got its start when that building was demolished. And we realized that our history was quickly going away and trying to capture those stories as much as we could. So it's actually a collaboration between Phoenix Pride, ASU Libraries, and myself to make sure that that happens. And if you're also ever in the neighborhood, you might notice that there is a rainbow crosswalk right there at Portland. And so that is because there is a large amount of LGBTQ history right around in that area. Now, a couple years ago at Bisbee Pride, we unveiled a roving display that is Trans History of Arizona. Now, when I was like, hey, let's take a look at this and let's see what we can find. Not really quite sure what all we would find, but it was pretty amazing. I mean, I could not have done this without myself. And so here are some of the folks that were involved with this. You had the Arizona Historical Society, the Louise Lawrence Transgender Archive. You had the Digital Transgender Archive, as well as Trans-Spectrum of Arizona. And also, Whole World View helped make this a reality as well. And so, I'm so happy to be able to bring on a friend of mine, and I'm sure a friend of many of yours. So I can already see the smile and hear the laughter, which you're all about to hear as well. So welcome.
Hi.
Hello.
How you doing?
So, Kendra, tell us about yourself.
So my name's Kendra Tonan, hyphen Lizzarago. I kept my married name prior to from prior to transition. Um, I'm a trans woman. I've been out for 6 years in February, so this is my 6 year trans anniversary. Was in February. I'm a local person who advocates for the trans community here in Phoenix and in the Southwest. I'm the current president for Trans Spectrum of Arizona. I'm also the trans resource navigator for the Southwest Center for HIV and AIDS. I've done. I've been a member of the Imperial Court now for several years. I started as a lady last year, and now I'm Countess 15 for the reign. We're continuing our reign into the 2021 year. I'm also a part. I'm a girl in the House of Shangri-La, and I have my leather ma'am is Brooklyn Diaz.
Ah, very good. And so what is your performance name?
Serotonin.
Very good. So people might know you by both names or only one name. You never know.
Right. There's a lot of hats.
Exactly, there are. And so for folks who want to find out more information about Trans Spectrum of Arizona, which Kendra is the director of, here you can find their information, email, phone, or even you can find them on Facebook as well.
Mhm.
So, and so tell us a little about what's going on in this.
That's my wife and I. We renewed our vows at our 15-year anniversary, and so that is our first dance after our we renewed our vows. I had a trans gown made, as you can see. Um,
Indeed, that's beautiful.
and my wife and I renewed our vows. There's also Lisa Saint Laurent is hiding in the background back there. So, um,
Very good. And so then what's going on in this photo?
so that's me. Trans Spectrum was given an award by the Human Rights Campaign a few years back, and that's our founder for Trans Spectrum, Sherry Samansky. So that's I'm giving a speech thanking HRC for giving us the award, and Sherry comes up and speaks after me. So.
Very cool. All right. Well, one of the reasons why we're here talking about trans history is because, so often it's only that oral history that survives. I mean, really, when you look at the LGBT community here in Arizona, the first press actually for the community was started in Tucson in the mid 70s. Then you had Pride of Phoenix and Sunday's Child. And so those were really the first things documenting queer history by queers for queers. And so that's pretty important. Before that, it was only oral history, the way things were communicated. And so there were also different groups had newsletters. So here is Alpha Zeta and Rose, which were two different organizations that merged together for a short while. And this was based out of Scottsdale. And so we actually with AESU, I think they have a couple of these newsletters. If anyone out there has any more, I'm sure we would love to add those to the
The
BJ Budd
archives.
archives. So now one of the reasons why it's important that we have our own press is, I mean, here you can see back in 1921, um, Pedro Waro was detained in Globe for wearing women's clothing back in 1921. And you can see here's two different press reactions to the exact same story. Globe has a freak and arrest of a female impersonator. And so that's why it's important that we have our own way to tell our stories that fit our community. Now, one of the things that was really cool was several years ago, the Arizona Republic actually did a kind of a panel of trans folks talking about how they felt they were portrayed in the media for newspaper staff to really listen and understand and start a conversation on how they could better be represented in mainstream press. I mean, and here we see some icons of the community right there. I mean, I think front and center is Miss Millie, who I think might even be watching.
I don't know.
So
But if you have the chance to talk to Miss Millie, it's truly one of the greatest honors you can possibly have. What she did for our community and throughout the late 70s, early 80s, and through the 90s was phenomenal. So if you can bend her ear, let her talk to you, you won't regret it.
Indeed. I mean, she is a wealth of resources and knowledge. So, and then there are some other groups around Arizona. I mean, we've talked a little bit about Trans Spectrum of Arizona, as well as there's also the Southern Arizona Gender Alliance. And so, Kendra, do you want
Which is based out of Tucson.
to exactly? So, and really, we have to. I mean, I think give props and really take a look at what is now called the Two-Spirit community. And it's those indigenous communities that were here long before any of us got here. And a new term that they've created called Two-Spirit that kind of encompasses people outside of those gender norms. Now, they were really given the opportunity to do things outside of their gender and kind of actually exalted for those special talents, which we kind of, as a society, lost. And I'm so happy to see them kind of regaining that momentum and that power and a place in the community as well. And here they are. This was, I think this is the first Two-Spirit powwow held down at South Mountain Community College. Hopefully next year they'll be able to do another one. So those are always a lot of fun.
And everyone's welcome to them. It's not, you don't just have to be indigenous. I mean, obviously they want the LGBT community as a whole to be there for that. So
yes, no, exactly. And that's kind of the beauty of it. I mean, they're welcoming to everybody who walks through the door, and it's such a learning experience. So let's take a look at one of the earliest folks who, now, sometimes you run into an issue because transgender is not a term that has been around forever. And so this is about this one masqueraded as a bandit, and it is Pearl Hart. So she was a female stagecoach robber. She robbed that stagecoach back in 1899, and she dressed as a boy a lot.
dare her. How dare her?
I know. I mean, she originally actually came from Canada, but when she first got to the US, she wound up being thrown into a boys' detention center because they assumed she was a boy. And so I mean, I would say we could probably call her maybe even a gender outlaw. So it's funny because she is so often told about as a legend in Arizona, but people tend not to talk about how she dressed as a lot as a man. And then you can see the views of folks who dressed as women, kind of like with Pedro Warro. I mean, it was like you had in the 30s and 40s, it was like they were thrown in with mafia pickpockets and other folks as to not even be allowed to be near establishments selling booze or being able to perform in them. Luckily, that is no longer the case. Glad times have changed. I do want to give a shout out to Troy Walker. There is a documentary that is out now. I'm trying to get a hold of a copy called Troy, the Original Ladyboy. Troy grew up in Chandler, and his voice was discovered. He then wound in the military. He then wound up recording 2 records. The first one was on a label. The second one was self-produced because it had him singing about his love for another man. It was actually a cover of a Judy Garland song, A Little Thing Called Joe. And he is still around, and he became kind of a celebrity in the Hollywood cabaret scene, performing in mainly straight clubs. He also would come here, but he would come on stage even in the early 70s and talk about how mom wanted a girl, daddy wanted a boy, and with him, they were both happy. So he kind of played around a lot with that gender bending.
Androgyny.
Yes, very much. Androgyny. And then pre-Stonewall, which I think is really cool, back in February of '69, the Valley Art Theater in Tempe had a film festival where they showed the film The Drag Queen, which I think was going around on it was either on Amazon or Netflix, from the late '60s, about a drag contest back in New York, as well as something called Lavender Boy of the Month, which I've been able to find nothing about. So if anyone has ever heard of that movie, please let me know. I've been trying to find out something about it and can find virtually nothing. And then we have Monica Helms, who back in 1999 created the trans flag, the first trans flag. That original flag now sits in the Smithsonian Museum, which I think is really cool that it's now become kind of a symbol across the planet. And we actually have a little bit of announcement about Monica later on. But it is not the only flag that's been created right here in Arizona. So tell us a little bit about this, Kendra.
So I created that flag after going to Pride for a few years. My wife is a cis woman but a trans ally, and so she identifies as part of the community, but she's not transgender in any way. So I created a transgender ally flag. There was the straight ally flag, which is the rainbow on a black and white striped background, and I wanted to make a flag that included everybody. That has basically the Philadelphia Pride flag behind it with the transgender flag in front of it as an ally flag. So that's the story of why it was created, because my wife didn't have a flag that represented her as someone who actively works within the trans community but didn't have a representation within it. So
And plus, it's a beautiful flag as well.
thank you. I'm
You're
really proud of
welcome.
it.
And then we jump to 2007. There was a club out in Scottsdale called Anderson's Fifth Estate. Yeah, that was really kind of the precursor of kind of all the bathroom issues that Arizona's become kind of known for. And eventually the bar wound up closing because they could never just really kind of recoup from that discrimination.
Right. They got shown the power of LGBT dollars.
Right, exactly. And then, of course, then we have Miss Millie again. And, she does have a book. Sadly, it is out of print, that is called The Exceptional Impossible Woman Indeed, which is a great read and tells so much of her story. So again, she is such a great resource and so valuable to our community. So I always love giving her a shout out whenever I can. And then we have Eddie Broadway.
Wow.
Yeah. Mr. Male Illusionist of 2017, Emperor Court, Emperor 8, Emperor 13.
Emperor 13 of the Imperial Court.
Yeah. Mr. Trans USA for 2010.
2020.
And then also Mr. Phoenix Pride for 2014. So, but he is not the only title holder in Arizona. And so we're going to talk a little about another friend of Kendra's.
It's my ma'am. She's the 21st ever Miss World Bear, the 2018 Miss World Bear. She was the inaugural Miss World Bear. And she's part of she's very active within the leather community. She has multiple things that she does within that community and within rights of women's rights and people of color rights. And so I'm very proud to be underneath her as a girl, and she's very inspirational, and I love her very much.
Well, and that's something that's I think kind of impressive about our leather community here in Arizona, is that it's very trans accepting.
Definitely. And one of the things that Brooklyn has done is actively working to make that happen. She actively works within the leather community to give trans people safe places and to make sure that trans people have a place within that community. And so people understand, ways that are safe to express themselves as a trans person and actually have without getting into too much detail within the BDSM community to make sure that there are safe places to play as a trans person and the importance of consent within those places.
Right. And not only, and she was the first one,
She's the first Miss World Bear.
which I think is really cool that we keep having multiple title holders right here in Arizona. And it looks like she's even in the Echo Hall of Fame.
She is. She was in the that episode, that issue of Echo is a really good issue. So if you can go through their backlog and look it up and read her articles, they're great.
And so now we're going to talk a little bit about a project that Kendra and I worked on. So this is a Russian gender pioneer who passed away in 1906. He happened to pass away here in Phoenix.
Why was he here?
And so I actually had a friend who was doing some work and said, "Oh, in this green patch there in that corner, he's buried." And so I started researching his story and realized that it was an amazing story and that he had no headstone. So actually about a year ago this year, we did an unveiling of a headstone for Nikolai Duralin. And I mean, his story is rather amazing. He grew up in Russia and started dressing as a guy, and then wound up moving to Chicago, getting a fairly good job with the government there, with the World's Fair in Chicago, with the Russian exhibition, and got himself a wife.
Who swears that he was a man.
And then, although they divorced because he was too amorous with lots of other women, including chorus girls. And so wife number 2 is supposedly a chorus girl. And so he then contracted tuberculosis. And like so many other folks in Arizona's past, he came to Arizona for what once was clean air. I know, isn't it? Yes, exactly. And things didn't go well for him. He actually wound up passing away here in Phoenix. Now, originally he had an agreement with his second wife, Anna, that if he was to pass away, she was the only one to ready him for burial. But she wasn't with him on this trip. And so some cohorts around him decided they would do it on their own. And so they were amazed when they pulled down his trousers and found a fake phallus, even fake testicles. And then his story, as you saw earlier, let's go back. So the story went viral for 1906. It was above the fold on newspapers all the way from Bisbee to Australia. And he was talked about for quite a bit. I even found his name popping up for about 30 years after that, but then kind of fell into obscurity. I mean, there were small references to his story, but not that much. When we did the unveiling of the headstone, the Arizona Republic did an article on him, and that then went on to USA Today. And so it got national press. And through that, there was a gentleman who teaches math in a Russian high school who then said, "Hey, I've written a book." And so earlier this week, I actually was on a Zoom call with him and mostly Russian folks as they talked about this book. Now, what's interesting, it appears to be the first book on someone who's trans in Russian. So it's a pretty big deal.
Definitely.
And it's actually it was put on by a Russian bookstore out of San Francisco. And it was a really kind of interesting discussion and talk about Nikolai Derelin's life and how even within Russia, within terms of the Russian language, there are issues of being trans because of they have a neuter or a neutral. So there are some things that are not masculine or feminine. And so that's creating some problems for folks. It's just, I mean, his story is amazing. I mean, once this was discovered, he was buried, he was connected to Russian aristocracy. So he had a monthly stipend coming into him. But from the US side, the story is that because in his will he had left all his money to his wife, the court said because he was a woman, he couldn't be married to a woman. So the money went to his mother, who he was estranged from. So that's probably yet another reason why he doesn't have a headstone. And virtually forgotten. And so that's why I think it was so important that, I mean, a whole group of us were working on this story to just try to figure out a great way to honor him. I mean, and that quote, which was to be yourself in a world that is constantly trying to make you something else, is the greatest accomplishment, which is Ralph Waldo Emerson. The goal was to do something that would be very respectful of Nikolai Derelin, not something that we easily could have attached, say, a trans flag to this or something. But as a group, we decided not to do something like that, but to be more true to who he was.
Right. And a quote from someone during his time period.
Yes, exactly. And so, and I mean, and yeah, I have to also give Greenwood Cemetery, when I cold called them and said, hey, you know, I want to do this, they said, okay, let's go. I mean, it took working with them about 2 years to make this happen, which was perfect because it gave us enough time to raise the funds to actually pay for it. And looking forward to when that book is then in Russian, maybe translated to English. Or one of the things that I really like is this guy spent like 8 years researching this and was able to find all kinds of kind of obscure references. And so it kind of pulls them all together. So I'm hoping that people will take this and do further research. I think it's one of those things where it could easily also be adapted to a movie, kind of like a Gentleman Jack type thing, because he may or may not have been a Russian spy. There were quotes about how he at one point may have tried to blackmail his mother and to get more money. And that's why he started dressing as a guy. And so I'm intrigued also to find out the Russian side of the story. I mean, because we've already seen how the press can manipulate it, and it was a very sensational story. And so I just think it's so cool that we have that bit of history here.
I agree. I'm thanks for you for helping find it and bringing it to all of our attention.
Well, and I mean, it was, you know, again, it takes a village. It was a friend who was actually working on a Find a Grave project, which is something for genealogists who are researching their family trees to be able to go on and find grave sites and headstones. And so they go through cemeteries and document them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's real. And so it's a really great resource. And so I had a friend who was doing that in Greenwood and came across his gravesite and said, hey, you should go look into this guy's story. It's really kind of fascinating. And so from there, it kind of snowballed. And I think you were probably one of the first people I reached out to when I found this out. And I was like, oh my gosh, we've got to do something for this guy.
Right.
So that way I mean, we only know about him because his secret wasn't kept.
Right. And that's a huge issue for a lot of trans people, making sure that, you know, we get to just live our lives and be ourselves. And that was one of the things we wanted to honor with Nikolai, was making sure, you know, he was given a placard with his name on it. At least that's the least we could do for him.
Right. But also, I can't even imagine back in that time what it must have been like to, I mean, the strength he must have had to be able to be his authentic self, even in the face of so much adversity.
I agree. wholeheartedly. I mean, it's very reminiscent of like just when we were talking about Millie earlier, the same kind of thing. I mean, not to saying transition is easy now, because truly, I'm not saying that. It's easier. It's easy. It's not by any means an easy thing to do, but I will say it's definitely easier than it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 100 years ago, 110 years ago at this point. The fact that this person was able to transition during this part of history and actually live his life and quote unquote fool people into believing he was who the person that he identified as is phenomenal, and continue to live his life in to none of us would have been the wiser had his plans actually gone through the way they were supposed to.
Right. I mean, and in fact, they actually wound up having to dig his body up because his wife swore that that couldn't be her husband because her husband was a man.
Right.
And so I mean it was I mean it's real. I mean it's one of those things where the more you read about it, it's like the more questions that arise. Um, I also think it's interesting because in kind of this cancel culture, he was not a very nice guy. I mean,
Mm-mm.
there was a story about how he was visiting another city and was really kind of hitting on some young woman whose father happened to be the police chief, and things didn't go so well for him. And
Right.
so it's like, I mean, he was not a saint by any stretch of the imagination.
And I don't think any of us are making him out to be that. I mean,
Right.
honestly, at this point, we're just saying he deserved to be able to live his life and be the person that he identified as. And truly, ultimately, at what cost, was he to live his life? Why was it an issue? He was married, he had a spouse, and she wasn't. You weren't his will stated she was supposed to be taken care of, and she wasn't able to be taken care of because of some antiquated law that was on the books.
Right. And so yeah, so I mean it's just a story that just kind of keeps unfurling. So I look forward to really getting a chance to read this in English
I
or
agree.
or or someone else's work. I mean, it was really interesting. There was also a person on the call, on the Zoom call, who was from Tucson.
Okay.
So I know I sent him a link, and so I don't know if he's on today or not. But it was really interesting because it's like all these questions come up about. I mean, how was he able? I mean, so many things, especially for the time period.
Definitely.
So
But, I mean, in my own experience, I'll say that as a trans person is for the most part, like, one of my biggest things about coming out as a trans person was the fact I was afraid everyone was gonna figure out that I was trans, and it was gonna be such a huge issue, and going out in public was gonna be such a big thing. People don't pay attention. Unless it's involving them specifically, they don't freaking care.
oh, and he is here. Great. So yeah, no, and so you brought up a little bit of a topic that we should explore a little bit more. So clothing. I
Mhm.
mean, what do you wear out in public? So what have you started over at Southwest Center
Oh,
to help
okay.
people with that?
Okay, so one of the programs that we have going at the Southwest Center, besides all the other great things that we do with this at the center, but one of the things that we're doing with the trans resource program is we're starting a clothing closet for trans individuals. Um, between Jericho and I, who's the trans health navigator, I'm the trans resource navigator. We're created a closet with the help of the Imperial Court. We were able to do a fundraiser, and we had over $23,000 of donations given to us um, through in-kind donation and cash. And we did it. We did a clothing drive for about a month, and so I have a storage unit sitting in the middle of Phoenix right now that's full of clothes. We're going to go through sorting it and getting it organized for with volunteers and getting it organized and set up. And we're looking like end of June is kind of when we're trying want to have our debut for it. But we're trying to put together a clothing closet for the trans community for people to come in, get free clothing. Um, and the identity that they affirm as, whether it's female, male, wherever you fit in between, or or nowhere in between, wherever you fit, clothing that makes you feel like the person that you are. Um, one of the things that we are doing with that is I've taken male mannequins and female presenting mannequins and actually cross-dressed them. Um, so I've feminized a masculine body and I've masculinized a feminine body to show um, feminine presenting body and masculine presenting body to show that it's possible to do. If I can do it on a mannequin, we can do it on, we can help you as well.
Nice. And there is also the Willow Scott Agency, which is a trans modeling agency here in town.
It is.
Yeah. So, and I'm like, oh, and I know, and so I'm hoping they're involved as well.
Not yet, but it's definitely
Okay.
something we are reaching out to them. And so
Okay.
one of the things that we are going to be doing, the other part of this program is to actually move it into like a workforce development type of program. So we want to help trans people if they need help with employment to start them into building resumes and actually how to interview for a job process as a trans person because there's going to be questions that okay, I take that back. They're they feel there are going to be questions, or there's someone may have a question that pertains to their being transgender, especially if they haven't done their name changed on their documents and that kind of thing. That stuff becomes an issue, and so we want to make sure how to get over those hurdles and help them interview properly through that process. And then also the next step is to actually do a job fair and actually bring in trans affirming companies to help them um, get into the workforce.
Which is really great. So I do want to give a shout out to an event that's actually happening next week. And so there is the Museum of LGBT of Culture and History. There's a group that's been working to put together a museum in the DC area that would start archiving and showcasing our LGBT history. And they are going to do a live feed from next Saturday from 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time to 1. And I know at some point in there, I'm going to be talking to Monica Helms, who, as we mentioned earlier, designed the trans flag. And she is also a military veteran. And so, kind of talking about her whole career as an activist in so many different ways. So, looking forward to that. And that actually will be a public forum. So, if you go on to if you look up the Museum of LGBT Culture and History on Facebook, or you can also go to AZ Gay History to our Facebook page, and you can find the link there to attend, which I think is it's gonna be really fascinating. And I see Bobby's on the line as well, as I kind of talk a little about what the museum is intended to do and maybe even look like, and some of the organization. And so that should be really interesting and really exciting. I mean, especially given some of the last few years of actually respecting our history and starting to collect it and make sure it's accessible. Now, I also would like to open it up for questions from people. I mean, I see Daryl Redleaf wanted to know if there were tours of gay history in Phoenix. I've actually done a walking tour of Roosevelt. So taking a look at the where the 307 was, talking about cruising Central, talking about that whole area and what it was like. It was an active spot from really the mid 40s to the mid 90s. And so at this point, let's open up to questions from other folks to see if there's anything else that people would like to talk about. Or maybe if Bobby wants to throw out some more information about the museum. So Kendra, have you started performing again yet?
I've done a few virtual performances during COVID, and then through the past year, I helped do the Phoenix Pride or the Pride Tour. I was part of the Pride Tour, and so we did performances in Bisbee, Flagstaff, and I did Bisbee, Flagstaff, and Casa Grande. and all of them were really great. Had a great time. We fundraised over $10,000 for between the different cities for all their different prides for the cities that we worked in. I think they also did Yuma, and there's one other city, and I'm drawing a blank on what the other city was.
I
But
think they also Flagstaff, I think.
I did flag. So I did flag. I was there for
Oh,
flag.
okay.
I was there for Bisbee, and I was there for Casa Grande, and there was two before me, and I don't know what it was. Yuma, and I'm not sure what the other one was.
Okay. Now you mentioned the Imperial Court. Can you talk about the court a little bit?
So the court is a 501c3 that fundraises for other 501c3s. As you've seen, Eddie Broadway is a former emperor for the court. So the court has a hierarchy between it. An emperor and empress are elected every year. It's a public vote, and so the vote is put out. Our current reigning title holders are Nikki Knowles, who's our empress, and Carrington. I'm going to butcher his last name. Carrington Dubois, I believe is his
I
name.
think it is Dubois.
And he's our current emperor. We're reign 15 of this year of it. There's several people within our community who are active within the court. Our current standing president is Lady Christian for the court. Christopher V. Lee is a former emperor. I mean, there's like Brooklyn Diaz is actually part of the court at this point. Masquerade is a member of the court. So we have several people who are tied deeply into our Phoenix community who actively work within the Imperial Court. Eva Angelica Stratton is our Princess Royale this year. She actually was very instrumental in making sure and helping organize the clothing drive that we did for the Southwest Center. So between her, Jericho, and I, we're the ones we put together the clothing drive and actually organized it and made it all happen. So.
Oh, that's real. I love that so many people are getting involved and helping out other folks as well to be their authentic selves.
Definitely, it's a huge goal within the court to make sure that helping the community as a whole. It's through the heart, or from the heart through the community through the heart for the community through the. Oh God, I'm butchering this, and I'm.
Take a deep breath. It's okay.
From the heart, through the court, for the community, is the motto of the court. So.
Okay. So yeah, and we need to set up. I do have a couple clothing racks and a male torso.
Oh my God!
So
that's awesome.
So yeah, so I can either drop them off or what, but yeah. So
definitely, we can meet up at some point. Whatever works.
Oh darn, we'd have to meet. Oh, yeah, man. So I'm surprised there's no questions. I'm like, oh, I was hoping people would be like, hey, what's going on? So, but it's also a beautiful day out. So
it is a beautiful day out. I was outside earlier, and I'm like kind of sad I'm not out in the sun right now.
Well, soon you will be.
Yeah.
So then later I'm doing a with Rosie Bush, we're doing a hot sauce test, and I'm going to be with Mia Adams.
Ooh.
So I'm kind of scared because I'm like, I have no idea how hot they're going to get, but I think it'll be an adventure with those two. I have no doubt.
Just run now. Just
I'm like, as long as there's lots of butter and yogurt, so that way I can kind of keep cooling my palate down because.
Okay, so I'll give you a secret. So when it gets to the point where it's so hot you can't handle it, that's where you can then eat the hottest one, even hotter than that, because your taste buds are fried. So I've done like the hot ones challenge. And so you get to the point that it's like 6 or 7 is like the battery acid tasting ones that are just, why am I eating this?
Right.
And then you're fried. So they're still hot. I'm not going to say they're not, but they're nowhere near had you cleansed your palate and actually cooled your mouth down. So you can push beyond if you've killed the palate at that point. If you cleanse, you're screwed.
So it's like starting from scratch when you cleanse. So it's
exactly.
like it would be like then pouring bachelor right on your tongue.
Mhm.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Yeah, I've done the hot wedge challenge for 2 years now, and so it's one of those like
You're
um,
a glutton for punishment, I guess.
I am. I really like hot stuff. I'm not gonna lie. It's really good. But I just for future like just so you like on the scales, like the first 3 or 4 are just your basic hot wings when you go to the restaurant and order hot wings. Up to the hot level is like 3 or 4. Anything beyond that, then it starts getting to where I probably shouldn't be eating this. And then you get to like 6 or 7, you're like, oh wow, yeah, I'm done. I can't. And but I push you. If you push through it, you're fine. But if you cool down and let your palate cleanse and and then start eating the hot ones, you just can't. It's impossible.
Oh, thank you
So
for
what they
that bit of knowledge.
So what they should do is start you on the hottest one and work you down, but they don't.
No, because you start small and then work up to like blow the top of your head off.
Right.
So, all right. Well, I remember not to cleanse my palate, even though I'll be panting and sweating. And
Unless you're tapping out. If you're tapping out, there's nothing wrong with tapping out. Know your boundaries and go from there. That's all about, it's a huge part of our community is know what you're capable of doing and do it.
indeed. So what is on your agenda for the rest of the day? Oh, and actually, I have Mia calling.
Oh. So I'm actually in the process of moving. We're gonna move. Actually, as soon as I'm done with this, I'm gonna tear my computer down, and we're gonna move my office into my sewing room, and my sewing room is gonna come out into where my office is. My sewing room's in the back of my house, and so um, I work from home occasionally, and I need a quiet place where I can do that because I do meet with clients virtually, and I want to make sure that they have a safe space when I'm talking to them. And if I'm in the middle of because my office is in my dining room, which is a public area in my home, and I want to make sure that I can close a door and make sure my clients get the safety that they need.
So, and let's go back and your sewing room. So you sew.
I do.
Ah, I didn't realize that you sewed.
It's a recent addition. It's something I've done in the last year and a half or so. COVID gave let me try some new skills.
Understandable.
Um, and I work. I've sewn my costumes, stoned my costumes, do my style my hair. I know how to do all these things. Obviously, I also have people do these things for me because sometimes it's just easier and more time consuming or less time consuming to have someone make something for you. Um,
Yes, someone knows what they're doing. Because if you don't know what you're
and then
doing, it's like it can take me forever.
right, and that's part of the process. And obviously, I have a great drag mother, who's Sonia J. Savage, which I'll shout out to her right now. Um,
Oh, I
she
didn't know she was your drag mother.
yes,
Oh my gosh, I had no clue.
so she helps me with sewing, and I also have a friend, Suzette Murphy, who is actually helping me do a lot of sewing right now as well. So between them, they're teaching me the skills of a seamstress. So
Wow. So soon you'll be whipping out your own costumes,
I
lickety
have
split.
I have I have made a couple. So it's not that I haven't been making them. It's just somewhat. I'm a large person, and having to make my own and having to go and buy clothes off the rack sometimes isn't the easiest thing to do, especially when I'm trying to do these costumes. And the more intricate the costume gets, the harder it is to actually find something that's not a moo basically for me. So
Right. Because nobody really looked that good in them except Mrs. Roper, although they are pretty darn comfortable.
right, I've seen LC rock a moo, so Lady Christian can rock a moo. I'm not gonna lie.
Well, and it's funny. Coming up next weekend is a group, Tiki Oasis, which is like a 4-day celebration at the Valley Ho of Tiki culture. And so there is the Aloha Caftan Society. So I already have my caftan picked out to go wander with everybody and my little flowered shower cap.
Nice.
Yeah, exactly. So, and even within that group, it's really kind of fun because there is the Lavender Luau, which is the LGBT component of Tiki Oasis.
That's awesome.
So yeah, so we're looking to put together a virtual program coming up in June that is going to focus on queer tiki history.
Wow.
So that so
That's
yeah, so so we'll see what all we can find. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, you don't know until you ask the question.
and that's a lot of the I mean, that's a lot of things that we, like you said, our history is so verbal within the LGBT community, and unfortunately, being part of, working for the Southwest Center for HIV and AIDS, I mean, I had some of the education before, but no, working within that community even more so now is realizing we lost an entire generation to a disease and so a lot of our verbal history has been lost up to this point. And
Right.
so, you know, the people who are still around, those are the people we do need to talk to, and those are the people we do need to document their history and making sure. So what you do within our community is phenomenal, and I'm so happy to be your friend, and I'm so happy that you do the work that you do.
Yeah, and we just last month actually with the mayor's office, with City of Phoenix mayor's office, we did a storytelling series of getting folks to join us virtually and share stories and to kind of improve their storytelling abilities. And so we're looking to do that again. Hopefully in a few months we'll start that up again and looking to actually even do some in-person storytelling with a virtual component so that way people can attend from wherever, either telling
Perfect.
or watching. So
That's one of the things with Transspectrum, I mean, obviously with the state opening back up, we Transspectrum hasn't been meeting in person for over a year now. We are doing virtual meetings, and so one of the things that we decided as a board was that we were going to, moving forward, we were going to continue to keep the virtual component of our meetings. So we'll still have our virtual meetings, not during the same time that our regular meetings are, because obviously we want to keep those meetings safe, and basically what happens in those meetings stays in those meetings. It's very Vegasy in there. Um, and so we want to make sure that the people who are in those meetings do feel safe and have the ability to get to disclose whatever they need to disclose during those meetings. But we all want to keep the virtual meetings because we realized we weren't just reaching people in Arizona at that point. We realized because we were able to do it virtually, we had a national, even an international audience that were people of coming in and having these meetings and being able to speak in these meetings where we weren't reaching them before. So
and then well, actually, when that's one thing, it's like, and that was like one of the first things I noticed when they did the first virtual Pride was there were sessions where it was just like an open chat.
mhm.
And a young person got on and said, I'm 13. It was like my parents would not have taken me to Pride. So I'm so happy that I can attend something that's a community based from the privacy of my own room without having to travel or tell someone where you're trying to go.
Right.
Which I think that's such an important piece of. I think that's one of the things that came out of this whole thing is that virtual component of things. So I'm so happy that you guys are keeping that virtual aspect.
It was super important to us as a community to make sure that we were doing that. We did realize it was important within the board itself, and we went, okay, we need to make this happen.
Nice. Well,
Changing
Kendra,
my I'm changing my background. Sorry.
okay, I was like, what's going on? It's like I was like, okay. I was like, oh, technical difficulties.
Nope, just change my background. Sorry.
Nice. So tell us a little bit more. So how did you come up with kind of the concept for the trans ally flag?
So I been to several prides, and in doing my research for finding an ally flag, the only one that was available is the straight ally flag. And like I said, it's the A in the center in the pride colors, and then it was a black and white striped flag. That and my wife's like that I don't identify with that. It doesn't it I don't I'm part of the LGBT community. I don't identify as a straight person. So why is that's not my flag? And so it was like, okay, so what do you want to see in a flag? And then talk to several people and realized how do you want to be represented within this flag? And so that's where in doing my research, that's what I came up with.
Nice. And and I love how it's like none of us are doing this all onto ourselves. It's everything is such a community project.
Oh,
Getting input from
definitely.
other folks as well. So
Yeah, it was definitely not something that I went like, "Oh, I just this needs to happen," and there's, some people are saying, like, "Why does a trans ally need a flag?" Well, because we have representation for everyone else in the LGBT community as a flag, and there's no trans ally flag. To be able to show this and show that you're an ally to the trans community or an ally to the LGBT community is an important thing to have, and to give trans people that safe space and realize that that's someone I can feel safe with.
right. So thank you for changing your background to that trans ally flag.
No problem.
So, and actually, if I do this, we can see more of that flag. So there we go. That way you can say, you can see that rainbow flag within the trans in the middle of it. So
Mhm. So, and I didn't want to just do the standard pride flag. I actually wanted, I realized the importance of including the the Black and the Latinx community and making sure that they are represented within our LGBT as a whole, because disproportionately they're the ones that are hurt the most within our community, and so making sure that, and they're the pioneers of most things that happen within our community. Between the first people that threw the brick, Miss Millie, who's here, is obviously a Black woman and worked diligently within our community, and countless number of names who've done the work, and a lot of and people like me get to stand on their shoulders, and so that's, making sure we're honoring them and showing them the love they deserve.
exactly. And and I do look forward to when I know Pride is rescheduled, I think, to November. And so
Mhm.
I hope we can actually have the trans history of Arizona display out there so that people can get a look at that. And I hope that people bring more things forward and say, hey, did you know about this story? Did you know about that story? Because once you start asking the question, people will start bringing things.
Oh,
So,
definitely.
yeah. So I want to say thank you so much for
Oh,
joining me
not a
this
problem at all.
afternoon as we get
I
a chance.
appreciated it.
Yeah, no, any chance to get to talk to you is a great opportunity. So it's been too long.
Definitely. I miss doing, like, the banned book reading. We need to do that again.
I know. I'm hoping, maybe we can do one September again.
That'd be great.
So we shall see. If not, maybe doing one virtually, if not an in
Definitely.
person. All depends on where the world is going.
Yeah, but, I'm always here when you need me, baby, and
All right.
that's
And that is so much appreciated.
thank you. I really do appreciate you.
Oh, and you as well. So, well, have a great rest of your day. Enjoy your moving of your sewing room.
Thank you. I'm actually looking forward to it because it'll actually make my sewing room bigger because it's coming into my dining room, but it's giving me more privacy for my office, so at the same time, it's a win-win for both situations.
Right. Very good. Well, thank you so much and have a great rest of your day. And I hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
So, let's give a huge shout out to Kendra again because I so appreciate her being here and being able to share with us. So that's all we have. I do want to throw this slide up so that people can reach out to the History Project if you would need to, or if you have any ideas, as well as then for Trans Spectrum of Arizona. So that way, if you need to get in touch with them, since especially they are going to continue doing the virtual programming, and holding some virtual meetings outside of their normal meetings. So again, thank you all so much for being here and taking some time out of your gorgeous day to come inside and chat with us. Have a great rest of your day.